Welcome to A Cup of Compassion, sponsored by the Show Me Hope Crisis Counseling Program and the Center for Trauma-Informed Innovation at Truman Medical Centers. I'm Andrea Dalton, a Special Projects Coordinator in the Center for Trauma-Informed Innovation. Today, I will be sharing with you some tips from an article I read recently by Amishi Jha on the topic of attention and the fact that we are so overwhelmed. Please note that the information shared in this video session is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical or behavioral health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. If you have questions for us, you may leave them in the comments section of this video, and we will respond to questions as we are able after today. In early November, Dr. Amishi Jha published an article on mindful.org called The Brain Science of Attention and Overwhelm. But I've often seen this article shared as, "You're overwhelmed and it's not your fault." She talks in the article about how we're living in volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous times. VUCA is the acronym for that, V-U-C-A. And there are 10 ways that your brain reacts, particularly regarding your attention, when you are in those kinds of times. And mindfulness is one of the practices that we can do that actually helps us not only survive, but maybe even thrive. So first I wanted to share just a little bit about some of those different ways, those 10 ways that your attention is impacted by these volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous events. So first, she shares that your attention creates your reality. So the reason we even have attention in the first place is to solve one of the biggest problems that we have, that we're just taking in so much information all the time. There's way more information in our environment and in our minds than our brain can fully process at any given time. So if we don't have a way to filter that out, we would be completely overloaded. We wouldn't be able to function at all. And so our attention system is kind of like a flashlight that allows us to select and direct our resources to a smaller piece of information so that we can kind of narrow in on whatever it is we want to pay attention to. Now, sometimes it's not just what we want to pay attention to, but it is what is drawing our attention, oftentimes related to how safe we feel, not just physically, but also emotionally or socially. So realize this, your attention is powerful. It determines that moment-to-moment experience of your life. So what you perceive, what you feel, what you remember, what you think, and what you do. The second piece is that your attention is vulnerable to stress, threat, and poor mood. So although attention is like your brain's superpower, it has a bit of kryptonite, and those kryptonite pieces are threat, stress, and poor mood. It rapidly degrades your capacity for attention. And they're honestly things that happen really regularly when we're in those VUCA conditions. In the middle of a pandemic, for instance, we have circumstances that are just accelerating the rate at which our attention is degraded. So we're all experiencing this heightened sense of threat. We've got new and constant stressors. We have anxious feelings. Everything just piles on, and it makes it more and more difficult for us to maintain attention. And so that moves us into the third point, which is that your attention is limited. And as a result, so is your working memory. So your working memory has to work hand in hand with attention. It's what allows you to do something with the information that you focus on. So when you need to hold something for a few seconds, like a confirmation code, or composing in your mind what you're going to say in an email or a text message, thinking about how you're going to get from point A to point B, kind of visualizing that route as you're driving. So your working memory is kind of like a whiteboard. It's just a kind of a temporary space where you can hold on to that crucial information that you need just for a few moments. But it's only so big. We can only fit a few things in that working memory before we max out that space. And it doesn't last very long. So anything you write on your mental whiteboard starts disappearing in a few seconds, kind of like it has disappearing ink. So if you want to keep it there longer, you have to keep focusing on it. And that's where attention comes in. So we're running up against these limits of our whiteboards, so to speak, all the time as a result of the pandemic and all of the stress that we're experiencing. We're already spending a lot of our, very limited attention resources in so many other ways, and it just continues to suck up our attention when we have more decisions that we have to make, more impulses to overcome, more habits that we're either forming or trying to break. And so that leads us into the fourth point, which is that our attention often wanders. In any moment, there's a 50% chance that our brain has wandered somewhere else. And what often captures our attention, pulls it away from whatever we're focusing on, is our own thoughts and our own preoccupations. Our attention kind of gets hijacked by the things often related to stress and threat and poor mood, the kryptonite things that I mentioned in the previous item. And when that happens, we are more prone to error. We're more susceptible to poor mood developing. We're more likely to not be able to pick up on things in our environments. Our sensory perception can be kind of dulled. And right now, we're seeing people reporting an increase in intrusive thoughts. A lot of times those are about the pandemic or related worries. And, we've had so much happen this year in our culture with political and racial tensions, and those kinds of things are captivating a lot of our attention as well. And it can be really hard to pull ourselves back from thinking about those things, because they do, there's so much uncertainty. And when there's uncertainty, it just very quickly moves us down the path to worrying about how long is this going to go on? What are we going to do next? How are we going to fix this? And so we feel those threats, not just to our physical safety, but also to our psychological safety. The fifth item is that your attention is linked to your emotions. And I think sometimes that can be surprising information, because I don't think we always make that direct connection. But if you think of it this way, when we recall a happy memory, or we recall something that was sad or upsetting, we're actually using our attention and our working memory to do that. We fill up our whiteboards with that imagery, with that memory, with those thoughts, and that helps us construct the emotional experience that we have as a result of that memory. And so it can go in the other direction as well. We need that bandwidth of our attention to regulate our emotions as they come along. So if you're overcome by some feeling and you need to kind of stabilize or ground yourself, what do? A lot of times you think through the problem, or you distract yourself by focusing on some other topic, or you reframe the situation. And all of those tactics require attention. And if you're not able to access all of the capacity of your attention, because you've got all this other stuff taking it, you just won't have the cognitive resources to regulate your emotions. And so we end up feeling kind of dysregulated. And I think we're experiencing that a lot these days. And sometimes that then leads into difficulties with our relationships, because we may end up reacting in ways that we maybe don't want to, because we kind of go into our stress response. And so the next item is about connection. Our attention is essential for connection to other people. Most of the time, we are thinking in terms of attention about how we direct our own attention to sensations, to thoughts, to feelings, to memories, to the external environment. But we also direct it toward other people as we communicate and connect with them. So we're using our working memory kind of collaboratively. We have like a shared model in our minds where we have mutual understanding of what's being communicated between people. We use phrases like, we're not on the same page, or we are on the same page. And our ability to empathize with another person, to see things from their perspective, is really critical to connection. And paying attention is one of the most compelling ways that we show our interest, our care, and our love for other people. So while we're physically distancing, we can't always do that in the same way. We might be able to do that with the people still living in our home, but others in our environments, think about how much we're doing via Zoom, for instance, or other online meeting platforms. And that ability to show attention is really taxed in those platforms. We don't have that same kind of mutual back and forth that we are used to when we're face to face. And so this pandemic really is depriving us of those kinds of ways that we ordinarily connect with one another. The seventh item is that your attention can time travel, which I think is kind of fun. Sometimes that can be really useful. It's a really amazing capacity that we have to kind of fast forward into the future, to imagine and plan, but also to rewind back into the past and recall those really amazing memories. And sometimes they're not amazing memories. But when we are under those VUCA conditions, that capacity gets harder to control. And so we end up kind of stuck. Oftentimes we're sort of trapped in the past or the future. And we're spending a lot of attention longing for the way life used to be. We're worrying, we're catastrophizing maybe sometimes, and we also have hope. And all of that together can be really overwhelming. That uncertainty makes it more likely that we're going to play out scenarios over and over again. And we burn our attention fuel on imagined situations that may never actually happen. Which I think leads really well into the eighth point, which is that your attention is really easily fooled. So although we have this amazing capacity to time travel, so to speak, with our attention, it's kind of like a really incredible virtual reality machine too. We can simulate all kinds of scenarios and predictions, and we can do it very vividly. We can really, really use our imaginations to do that. And sometimes the ways that we do that can be so convincing that it leads our attention system to recalibrate our brain as though it's really happening. So we might end up filtering out or ignoring, not seeing what's really happening right in front of us. And when we get into those VUCA circumstances, our attention is even more prone to being transported into those kind of doomsday situations, if you will, or even just, playing out things that could have happened. If we'd made a different choice at that moment, what might life be like now? And so our ability to realize that that's not reality becomes really taxed. We forget that our thoughts are not facts. The ninth point is that your attention can be a really bad boss. So we all know that stress makes us feel bad. And when we have these long periods of stress, that really works our attention over time. There's an interesting concept around shelter fatigue. So people who are highly trained, but facing long periods of isolation will suddenly break quarantine, even while fully understanding the consequences. At a certain point, our cognitive capacities can become so overwhelmed that we're unable to maintain new rules. We're unable to maintain goals that we've set for ourselves in our working memory. We kind of throw them out the window or off the whiteboard, so to speak. And instead, our attention leads us to do what is comfortable and familiar, whatever we practiced the most. So overcoming those habits of the past can be really taxing on our attention. It's a lot of work to try to work against that. So keep in mind that sometimes your attention might direct you to do something that isn't in your best interest. So that's why she says it's a bad boss. The 10th point, I think, is hopefully the most reassuring. Your attention is trainable. So right now we're in these situations where we have so much stress, we're so overwhelmed. And what can we do about it? Practicing mindfulness actually is really becoming key. We've seen it in research. People have felt it in their own personal practices. And when we practice mindfulness, when we do meditation, especially regularly, doing it on a regular basis, that helps protect our attention even under those VUCA conditions. Because mindfulness practice is about staying in the present moment, staying out of judgment, and staying aware of your sensory experience, both your internal and your external. It can kind of become like a mental armor against some of those most damaging habits of the mind, our mind wandering, rumination, catastrophizing, which is what we will kind of naturally go to in those difficult circumstances. So mindfulness practice can help restore our attention so we can regulate our emotions. And then we can connect with our emotions differently. We can allow them to arise and then pass away, moving through us rather than holding on to them. And mindfulness practice can train us to keep our attention in the present moment, increase our ability to maintain awareness of what's happening so we're not as easily hijacked. We're not as easily fooled into believing that our thoughts are reality. So even though it's helpful to start training before you get into a period where you have a lot of stressors, you can start at any time and still get benefits of it. In a lot of research studies, they've noticed things like short programs of just a few hours show results within 4 weeks. There's sort of a minimum effective dose. You need to have a regular daily practice in order to see measurable improvements in your attention. But what they found is that as little as 12 minutes a day for 3 to 5 days a week is protective when you are in those high stress situations. And they've also seen in the research a dose response effect. So the more mindfulness meditation practice you do, the more you benefit. So I encourage you to find ways to practice mindfulness meditation. And with that in mind, I would like to lead you through a mindfulness meditation today. For this mindfulness meditation exercise, I'll invite you to sit in an upright posture. Be sure you're stable in your chair wherever you're sitting, or if you're sitting on the floor. Make sure that you're comfortable as well. And this will be a pretty short practice. And for this period of time, your task is just to pay attention to the sensations of breathing and to be very specific about how you pay attention to the breath. So once you get settled, you can close your eyes if you're comfortable doing that, or just lowering your eyes, not focusing on anything. And take a breath in, and then breathe out. And now as you continue to breathe, focus in on the sensation that's most prominent to you. What stands out to you the most as you breathe? Where do you feel that? What do you notice? Perhaps it's the coolness of the air in and out of your nose. Maybe it's your abdomen moving up and down. Maybe your shoulders. You might actually feel your lungs filling with air. And whatever sensation tied to your breathing feels most prominent, focus on that. Just noticing it. Does it change? Or is it staying the same? And if your mind wanders, that's okay. Just gently, with kindness, bring yourself back to focusing on that sensation. And now begin to pay attention to what arises in your mind. Again, if your mind wanders, that's okay. Just notice it. Notice that your attention has moved off of the target. Notice if there's anything that prompted that, or if it just happened. Notice when you have thoughts or sensations or memories that aren't about the breath at all. When this happens, simply return your attention back to the breath, back to that sensation that you noted. Letting go of any judgment, remembering it's very normal that your mind would wander. Continuing to breathe You might experiment with breathing more deeply or more slowly. Continually pulling your attention back to the sensation of your breath. Do this for 3 more breaths. And then as you're ready, on your last exhale, you can open your eyes and release this practice. So that was a very brief practice of mindfulness meditation, and you can do that very simply multiple times during the day if you want to. You can do it for longer. You might start with a smaller amount of time and work up to a longer amount of time. It does really train your brain in the direction of mindfulness, of attention, and of staying in the present moment. So I hope that this practice will be helpful to you, and I hope that you can find ways to incorporate that into your daily routine. Thank you for joining us today. We hope this practice will serve as a tool to support your well-being during this time. I invite you to join us again next Thursday at 12:30 p.m. Central Time for another Cup of Compassion right here on YouTube. Please subscribe to our channel to be notified of new videos. If you would like crisis counseling support, please call 816-404-6222, or for immediate care, call the Disaster Distress Helpline at 800-985-5990. Take good care.